And today in worship, we have a little different day. So it's a little more music focused and a little more story focused. And so we are going to hear from Sydney and from Scott Groth testimonies about what God is doing in their life. And I think there is nothing more beautiful in the life of the church than to hear how God is at work in your lives. And so we're going to get a chance to do that here in a little bit. And
So, like Laura said, I'm going to be giving my testimony today. And Laura asked me to talk about what God has been doing in my life for the last year. So that's what I'm going to do. My name is Sydney Simpson, and I've been at St. Paul's for a year and a half as the contemporary music director. So I lead the band, and along with Mitch, and we pick music and all that good stuff. I'm also a teacher in Kansas City, which is wild and super fun most of the time. And when I first came to St. Paul's, I mean, I've been a Christian my whole life. I'm from a small town that's very religious, and in college, I clung to my faith, but also kind of felt embarrassed by it because Christians don't always have the best reputation right now in our society. And being at KU, I knew for myself, like, my faith does not hurt people. The God that I know and love would never say these things to you or treat you this way. But when I would say I was a Christian, I know that's what people were thinking, was that other side of Christianity that harms. And that was where I was when I came to St. Paul's, was kind of not really wanting to mention to people that I was a Christian, that I went to church, that I was active in the church, because of the stereotype that unfortunately kind of goes before us. I really felt like people were getting it all wrong with Christianity, that the God that I know, that the Bible that I read and studied, and the God that I loved and knew from my own time in Scripture would not hate people, would not be mean, would not be hateful and excluding others, and I just knew that. But I didn't have the background or the foundation to say that to other people yet. So then I applied for this job at St. Paul's, and I didn't really do any research before. I just kind of was like, I want to lead worship somewhere. It'd be cool to get paid. Like, let's see what happens. So I get to this interview, and Laura, I remember because it was over Zoom, because we were in COVID, and she sent me the welcome statement in the Zoom chat and was like, go ahead and just read this. And so I read the welcome statement, and then she was like, so what are your thoughts? And now I know, Laura's waiting for, like, oh gosh, is she going to be homophobic? Are we going to have to deal with this and, like, end an interview with her screaming at us and all that? But when I read the welcome statement, and it talks about, we value the worth, dignity, and gifts of every person as a child of God, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, socioeconomic status. I know I'm missing some. My jaw kind of just, like, hit the floor. I was like, I didn't even know a place like this existed. What? And it blew my mind. I think those are my exact words. I was like, I didn't know a church like this even existed, but I would love to work here. And in my head, I was like, if they don't hire me, I'm just going to show up and start going to church here. So it's a good thing that they hired me. Anyway, and so that really started this whole new, like, kind of like stage of my faith, where I was like, all of a sudden, Black Lives Matter and Christianity are one and the same, and LGBTQ rights and Christianity are one and the same, and all of a sudden, I could tell people I was Christian and be proud of it, because my church is different. Because my church actually practices what we preach. We feed the hungry, we clothe the poor, and we are fighting for the rights of everybody. That's wild. There are so many places where that's not the case even still. And so even to this day, when people say, or when I mention, like, yeah, I work at a church, and they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's okay, my pastor's gay. So anyway, that's not really what I say, but something to that effect, Anyway, so it's just really great to be part of something that I can be proud of, that reflects my values, that reflects the God that I know and love. So being here for the last year and a half has made me really proud to be a Christian again, which is just a good feeling, right? To feel like my faith is represented, and I can say that I'm a Christian, and it's not a bad thing anymore. Something that you all already know is special about St. Paul's, that Laura touched on this morning, is that we are a reconciling church. which means that we are not just like tolerate and like, yeah, if you're gay, you can come here and we'll still love you even though you're a sinner. It's like, no, like you were created this way on purpose by a creative and loving God to live the life that he made for you. And I think that is really, really amazing. And especially that really struck me when I first got here. So when I first got here, I was just like, oh my gosh, like Laura has a wife and she's on stage and she's talking and you guys are like laughing at her jokes about being gay and it's great. And it just like blew my mind. And I thought, I was like, you know, like this is really special. Like I'm really proud to be here because I have so many friends who are queer and who I love, who I know God loves, who they were made in his image and it's beautiful. And I thought that I was just happy for them. I was excited that I could be at a place where I could tell them, like, I'm a Christian, I go to church, but my church welcomes you and celebrates you. And that's what I kind of chalked it up to, was that my excitement was about that. But the fall of 2020, when I got this job, was like really, really rough for a lot of reasons. And shortly after I took this job, I started to question my own sexuality. Which you can imagine is very stressful because I was married to a man, and that was a really hard time for me. So I took a lot of therapy, a lot of tearful conversations with trusted friends, and a lot of prayer and self-reflection for me to realize that I actually am gay. I'm not attracted to men, I'm attracted to women. And it has been a really, really long road to get where I am. There's been a lot of twists and turns and potholes and those like giant cracks that only Vin Diesel can jump with like a ramp as he's like escaping an earthquake. And like that's like what we're talking about. But I've made it here now, and a lot of that is because of St. Paul's. I feel like God really wrapped me in his arms through this whole process of me reconciling with my own sexuality. And he did that by surrounding me with people who love me, like people like you, people like my amazing friends and some of my family, and showed me that he loves me, that he created me to be this way. And that has been really beautiful. So I know now, partly because of you all, partly because of the mission of St. Paul's, that there's nothing wrong with being gay, that I'm actually a reflection of God's creative and beautiful design, and that me living my life to my truest self is the best way I can glorify him. And so now I'm in the process of getting divorced, but I believe in the goodness of God. I believe that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And my faith is stronger than ever because God has carried me through this, and he has used St. Paul's, and he has used his faithful children, and he has used so many things in my life to show me how much he loves me, to keep me here, and to help me jump over those giant earthquake-sized cracks in the road. So praise God, and thank you for listening. Amen.
When I was growing up, we used to spend a couple weeks every summer at my grandpa's house in Salina, Kansas. My grandpa was a retired high school business teacher, and he was a playful person and a joyful and pretty ornery person at times, in a way that made going to his house an adventure. And so we always had a good time there. And he would always like to make small bets with us. And so one of the bets he used to make with us was he'd give us a stack of nickels. And if we could set the nickels on our elbow and catch them without dropping them, we got to keep the nickels, right? So I learned to be pretty good at catching nickels like that, right? It was spending money for Salina. I've worked most of my life in the software industry, and it's been a great career. It's fulfilling, and I found a lot of value in doing it, and a lot of community in it. But the last couple of years, I've started I hit that point where I was kind of burned out on software, and so I started looking around for other things to do, other places that I could take my life. And pandemic hit, and Pastor Carter asked me to come volunteer at the Hub, working with elementary school kids on helping them when they were doing remote learning, right? And something clicked, and I think maybe my grandpa Groth gave me a little nudge too from his high school teaching days. So I took a chance, right? And I quit my job, and I started into a master's program through Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools and Pittsburgh State, and followed Sydney into the KCK school system. And so I started teaching full-time this fall, teaching science to high school kids at Schlegel. If you dig a couple pages deep into the newspaper, this I think from Saturday, you'll see a story that mentions Schlegel in it and mentions KCK schools. On Friday, there was some vandalism. Some cars were broken into at Sumner, at J.C. Harmon, and at Schlegel. And that's kind of typical of the stories from KCK that make it into the paper, right? It's not the uplifting stories. We did get one in a couple weeks ago. Mr. Graham, our business teacher, started a market day, and the kids are coming in, and every Friday they sell stuff at the market. Friday this week, it was packed, and they sold out of everything they had. I bought a couple of LGBTQ plus buttons from our LGBTQ club at Schlegel. It is really cool and really exciting to see the kids uplifted in that way. But you don't hear about, like, the kid in my physical sciences class who she was on probation, court-ordered probation for fighting. And she turned things around last semester and became the president of our restorative justice team there. It's just kind of an amazing little story. You don't hear things about our band. Our band got over $1 million in scholarship offers this last year from different HBCUs around the area. So all of them have an opportunity to go to college on full ride scholarships. So little things like that don't quite make it into the paper, right? They're not big enough things, and they're not the kind of human interest stories that we often look for in the paper. But they're cool things, and they happen every day. And in my classroom this week, we were messing around with surface tension, right? So we were figuring out, dipole bonds, London dispersions. You all remember those, right? And so we were taking pennies, right? And we were setting them on our desks, and I was having the kids drop water on them. They dropped rubbing alcohol on them, and I might have stolen, you can't prove this, but I might have stolen some nail polish remover from Lisa's side of the cabinet. And so they were dropping some of that on there. And they'd see how many drops they could get before the tension broke, and so they could compare the surface tension and the molecular bonds of one substance to another. Well, I'm walking around with, a stack of pennies in my hand, and it was hard not to stack them up, right? So I stacked them up on my elbow, and I started flipping pennies. And so next thing you know, the class, other kids are taking all the pennies off their desks, right, stacking them up. And there's pennies all over the room. The volume level's up at 11. And Mrs. Thompson, our principal, slides in the room. Right? And I can see her looking around with this, okay. But she went over and talked to a couple of the kids. They pointed to the objective on the board, explained the surface tension thing we were doing, and a couple minutes after she left, I got my observation in the email from her, and it just said, kids engaged, lesson clear, you misspelled sustaining on the board, which is true. I did. On Friday, I took my physics kids outside, so this was shortly after the police had come for the vandalism, and they were building contraptions to keep eggs from breaking, right, when you drop them, so kind of a classic physics experiment thing. And I made a mistake. I gave them all balloons, and so they completely surrounded all their eggs in balloons, and they were falling at 1/4 mile an hour, right? So nothing's breaking. So I channeled my inner Grandpa Groth, and I pulled a pair of scissors out, and we started popping balloons. And now the challenge is really on, right? So what else have you done to prevent the eggs from breaking? And so the kids started climbing up. They decided they were going for it, and they started climbing up on top of the picnic tables up there and heaving their eggs into the air. Kids are screaming. The police are looking over at us. Eggs are coming down. And some of them, to their credit, some of the eggs survived. But we had a great time out there, even on a Friday with all the other distraction going on with the vandalism. I was thinking about it after Pastor Laura asked me to provide testimony on where I see God in my life. And I think the thing that struck me most, I'd kind of started with this idea of, calling and being called to teaching, but it didn't really fit for me. I mean, I kind of stumbled into teaching more than got called into teaching. But what did feel right and true was the idea of being called into community. And that's what I found at Schlegel. And that's what I find here every day too, right? Is this call to community. It doesn't matter if it's a public school system in KCK, the public school system in Johnson County, the public healthcare system that we've got, or our churches, or our businesses, software industry. I feel like God calls us all into community. And more than anything else, I think that's where I've seen God this last year, is in that call to community, in that call to being together in joy and in grief, and being able to hold on to one another and support each other. And it seems really simple to me at this point that where we're called, where we come together, where we support one another, that's where we find God. And so that's kind of where I am this year.